I don't know yet whether I'm a technical guy or a storyteller.
Mm.
Right? I love doing the technical stuff. I love storytelling as well. But I do the technical stuff only to storytell. Whereas there's some technical guys who do the technical stuff because they love it.
True.
They want to make a better renderer. They want to make a better GPU. They want to build better tech. So, but I think for me, it's driven by storytelling. What about you?
I think for sure, dude. Like even from college, if you remember the kind of stuff that we would do, one of the reasons I got into design was actually, this is getting into the work territory, so I'll be very abstract here. Was that anybody can make a note-taking app, right? But not everybody can make a note-taking app that a lot of people will use, right?
True.
What's the difference then? Both of them work on a very similar database read, write. You're creating, you're updating. But there's still some sauce that you add separately, or maybe as part of the whole cooking process, that takes it from just a note-taking app to a note-taking app used by millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and I think the secret sauce there that actually takes it here is storytelling, which is not just the stories you tell the people who will use your product, but the stories you tell yourself to, get yourself in a certain perspective. And then the stories you tell your team, so that instead of going in all these directions, you go into the direction that you think is worth going down.
No, I agree. I mean, dude, life is storytelling. The best in the world are all storytellers. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just, we have all these new tools as a designer. You have all these new tools that allow you to tell better stories. Right. And I heard this quote. I think somebody from Bloom was telling me this quote. I was in their office a few weeks ago, and they were just like, India's underbranded. India has so many companies. Every day we have so many companies, but how many brands do you have? And what's the difference between a brand and a company, right? Somebody has told you a story that you now believe. Right? Whether it's a story of trust, convenience, 2-minute Maggie, whatever it is, it's a story you now believe.
For sure.
And that's beautiful, right? Because then somebody else is playing your game, right? Somebody else that's part of the narrative. They think about it. It's there somewhere in the back of their head. And this goes to a more complex kind of topic, right? I think I sent you a video a long time ago. I'm going to segue into this in a weird way. I've written something on my phone. Let me just read it out as a cue. All right. So I believe, and this is the belief of a philosopher, computer science philosopher called Daniel C. Dennett. I don't know if you've heard of him. Heard of him?
No.
So essentially, his idea of consciousness, right, of what your personality, Abhinav, is, it's not for you. It was never for you. It's actually for everyone around you. So, and I'll draw the parallel here. This is me coming from a more relatable aspect, because I've been thinking about make a video about this, but I was like, how do I make it relatable? Think of it as Abhinav is the app screen. Okay, in a phone, you have all these different apps. Maybe you have one app about design, right? You know a lot about design, and you're collecting stuff in that app. Maybe all these apps are like data drawers where you just put in stuff. Now, at any given point of time, on Android, you can't have all the apps open, right? You have to shut down apps because otherwise too much memory, blah, 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 blah. You can maybe have 1 or 2 apps open at the same time. Now, suppose you need to access, Abhinav, you need to access your own app. Maybe you need to access the app for, how to go and buy milk, right? So somebody gives you a cue or a trigger. You need a cue or a trigger from the external environment for you to open that app. Without the cue or trigger, you are never going to open that app yourself, right? Unless your mom comes and tells you, Abhinav, you need to buy milk, or you go open the cupboard and you see, oh, milk's gone, right? So some trigger, some cue is responsible for you opening the app in the first place. Now, the idea that Dennett says is that makes you seem more like the OS. Abhinav's the OS that allows Abhinav himself to access the range of apps that he has in his head, right? And over time, as he learns new skills, he's putting more and more drawers in there, and he can pull out things whenever he wants. But Abhinav, the personality, is still the route to any one of these apps. Now, Dennett says that if you go even further, you realize that this set of apps, this Abhinav, is not for Abhinav himself, right? It is for everyone else around Abhinav. Right? Say your child or your friend or your brother or whoever comes to you and says, well, Abhinav, how do I do design? Right? He's used the trigger word design. going to go straight into your ears. You're going to open the app for design because you're slave to basically what you hear. Even you can try to block it out, and then you're actively trying to block it out.
I'm pattern matching. Yeah,
you're pattern matching. You open up design and you tell him something about design. So now he's opened this design app in his brain, and Abhinav is installing software in his app. Right? So you are basically an OS, which, well, I think I'm lagging. Hello?
No, I think you're good, dude.
Hello?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. So basically you are an OS that somebody else uses to retrieve data in your different folders, right? And then there's a power table between different people, which is if your OS or your app is of a later version or a better version than their app, then the osmosis will be, from a state of higher energy to a lower energy type of thing, more information to less information type of thing, until eventually, they have some maybe 60%, 70%, as long as they spend close time with you, proximity with you, some of it, right? So your environment defines a lot of you, and your environment basically has these trigger words that opens apps in your brain. Now I'm going to take this even further, right? In a day and an age where your transfer between you and another person, the data cable is words, right? You use some words, you're transferring information to them. They use some trigger words to get more information from you. In the future, when we have brain computer interfaces and I'm directly able to download your entire app from your brain to my brain, the OS will become unnecessary. I don't need to use trigger words, right? I can just directly download your entire OS because it's what? Even if it's a few terabytes at that time, it will be pretty easy in 20, 30 years. So I don't need Abhinav. I don't need Varun, right? And eventually, because it's 100% transfer, an instant 100% transfer, there's no need. Not only is there no need for the OS, it's like everyone is the same, right? So you create this one ultimate superhuman person who has all these different bodies roaming around in the world, right? With different shapes, but the ideas, the thoughts, it's all the same. It's one mind, right? And I've seen a more primitive version of that on, say, the Avalon Army, right? Where we've just said, oh, let's collect all our apps, let's put it here, let's, access the repository when necessary. Which it's just one step ahead of that. So I've seen it in more of a primitive way. You've seen it in your groups in a more primitive way, but it's, one is coming. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
I think it's interesting because these apps, in some sense, I was thinking about a lot of these apps we install ourselves. A lot of these apps come bundled with the phone, with us as a matter of, maybe your, not just your upbringing, but also the way you were born, for example.
And evolutionary biology. Yes. So it's just like the Android operating system.
Yeah.
Right. And it comes with like Google Play, Google, whatever, music. And that's your evolutionary biological system.
But here's the tricky part now, right? Tricky part is now these apps, some of them I installed, some of them I install over time. A lot of these apps actually install themselves, which is, I have so much information now. Let's say I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. There are all these patterns that I might not be matching consciously, but are being matched. And this is constantly updating and installing my apps. And without the self-awareness to recognize this, I might actually be carrying out the instructions of this, let me call it a being, right? Let me call this like this bigger being, which is this collection of patterns or a thought pattern, which is now
the central
acting
repository.
upon me. And now I am actually in control of this thought entity. And I think it's my idea that I'm doing this, but I'm actually being controlled. So then that brings you to the point of, what are these apps that you have installed on yourself that you did not install? You might think that, in fact, it could get even more subtle. It could get to the point where you're like, let's say tech, right? We're very into tech. We talk about futuristic stuff, but the bug that introduced futurism to us was spread through a certain mechanism. So it's almost like if genes are, or like if viruses spread, in the physical body, ideas sort of infect the mind, stay there, and you might not realize you have it.
Of course. It's like, dude, and I don't think you have a choice either. Like, think about it, right? Who hasn't heard of coronavirus? I know we won't speak about it, but who hasn't heard of it? But that's the internet putting pressure on you. Right? You have no choice but to create a folder called coronavirus in your head and be like, okay, here's all the information I'm getting about it. there is no way to block yourself unless you disconnect from the central app repository, and then
you're a data processing system in that sense, and you are forced to sort of do it.
you have no choice. I mean, there's no one can come and say, "Oh, I have complete control of my brain." I've heard about coronavirus, but I'm just going to shut it down. And you can't erase it. Try erasing coronavirus from your brain. You can't, right? So it's just.
But I think another thing that's making it real is, in the past, when we've had these large global scale events that people are like, this is going to change the outcome of where we're headed. It's like, let's take 9/11 for example, right? It was a pretty big deal. But then here's the thing: 9/11 was a one-time event. It was only in New York, and you were like, okay, it's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen to me. Like, of course, it's tragic, but then I could actually opt out of it, where I'm like, I'm not going to consume any news. Maybe it doesn't affect me, or eventually I'm going to choose to forget. Versus now, suddenly with coronavirus, it's not a one-time thing. It's a continuous thing. It's invisible. It's global level. And now I'm like, wait, I now have skin in the game where I actually have to care about it. So that way, that's like an additional level of strength to this. It's like the virus, coronavirus, is actually of two forms: the physical virus and then the meme, right? The
And now
virus
everything
will
has that
infect you,
double
but
form.
before the virus infects you, the meme infects you. And then that's you now putting your folders together. It's changing the way you process things.
True. And that just goes to tell you, right? The internet is just filled with so much junk, and you're slave to all of that junk, right? And the only option is for you to disconnect. To be honest, right? It's not like you can. There's no superhuman who can be like, I control, what comes in and all. Like, I know I'm the slave to all the information that I consumed since I was 1 year old, right? From my parents, etc., etc. Everything that I've been told, it's basically this giant thing. So you're totally under the kind of, at least in your formative years, under the mercy of your environment, of the things, of the sources that you consume. And I think parents have to do that for their children, right? Because who else is going to do that for their children, right? Parents have to come and say, listen, you're going to go here, you're going to speak to these people, you're going to consume information from these sources. It looks like a little bit tyrannical, but I think it's necessary, right? And that's what parents kind of try to do with school. They say, I'll put you to a good school so that you have good friends and not, people on the streets beating each other up, right? Parents try to do that in a certain way, but I don't know. I think in the internet, how do you? It's tough, dude. You're just, and there's so much random luck, right? Like, you could be somebody who could just easily get corrupted on the internet, and I think everyone has to go through a little bit of that to become, smart. Parents can't really stop that. But one wrong path down 4chan where you found something relatable, some emotions kicked in, and you became one of those crazy 4chan people, became a cyber terrorist.